Abusha for aha Ken to TV. In some day I will be a Oma Ganimo. You will copy more year Parliament House a year after your market.
In all honesty, I felt it was inappropriate. Shamima is a government spokesperson, not any government spokesperson, but the deputy presidential spokesperson. She's been a journalist of higher repute, and so she's very mindful of words and how words can mean and be interpreted out there. I felt that the use of the word that MP people who go and swim in it was very inappropriate. You see, I think people lose the whole essence of opposition parties. Opposition parties are parties not necessarily designed to fight government. Within the structure and architectural framework of democracy, it is in the wisdom of the framers of our democratic dispensation, our constitution, that indeed, when it comes to the work of opposition parties, they are very important. So when opposition parties are born and they make criticisms to any event or any situation that comes up, it does not necessarily mean that they ordinarily want to fight government. People living within NDC may have problem with the fact that president used, helicopter to move through the skies. I have no problem with that personally. I felt that there was no better means of assessing the flood situation than what he used. I have no problem with that. But you see, the whole idea and essence of democracy is for people to agree and disagree, and even in the disagreement, still agree. So when people raise matters or criticisms, I don't think it is fair for Shamima, especially looking at the position that she occupies, to then say that they should go and swim in the floodwaters. I felt it was inappropriate. Now, let me now come back to the substantive issue. Moro, I have always had a view that anytime we have a conversation about this flood situation, we often at times have a wrong framing of the flood conversation. Mostly, and of course, reflected in a lot of the arguments Shamima advanced, that mostly we attribute the flood to indiscipline and human behavior. Flood, for me, if you ask me, goes beyond indiscipline and human behavior. That is not also to suggest that indiscipline and human behavior do not affect flood, because we all saw the number of rubbers, sachet waters. Of course, we also cannot be dismissive about the fact that people have built in waterways and other things. But for me, if you ask me, is this a convenient way that politicians used to run away from responsibility and leadership used to run away from responsibility? The conversation about flood for me is more structural. What do I mean by more structure? You see, we must understand that there has been failure of institutions and systems that has brought us here. That is not to suggest that it's NDC that caused it. I read from social media, I think it was like a graphic publication, that even 1960, there was flood in Accra. So 1960 up to now is how many years now? Why are we still having a flood, recurrence of flood? And now it's even coming a heightened measure. We must understand that when we talk about human beings has demonstrated that they are unable to regulate themselves. Human beings at every point are unable to regulate themselves. If you leave human beings to their conscience or to their discretion, they will always be inclined towards negative behaviors and negative acts. It is a more reason why, as part of the social contract, we will some of our powers to the state to make decisions for us. And so when you see the president say that, it is attitudinal. You have people like Shamima say that it is attitudinal, it is human behavior. Yes, it is not entirely wrong.
I think that...
respectfully, Shamima, you flowed...
I just want to...
You flowed, I didn't interrupt. If Moro didn't interrupt, Moro didn't interrupt. You spoke about 30 minutes. Very well, you proceed.
Just so that you don't keep the narrative that I have said that the flooding is an attitudinal problem.
No, you can't mention it's a human behavior.
No, I made a number of points, and I told Moro that my substantive presentation on the floods when we come to that, because we're talking about prayer. Yes. And the points I made was because of the theme of the prayer.
So you let me react to your preliminary comments, so that when it comes to the substantive, we'll talk about it.
You. So just to correct that, maybe
at least you still have the opportunity to come in.
Definitely. The reason why I understand where she's coming from, you see, she made a general comment.
So
right?
I'm responding to the general comment, so that subsequently we'll come there.
Because you are talking about flooding.
Do you know my submission has been interrupted like 7 times.
Hey. Oh, you've been counting.
Yeah, at least 4 from you and 3 from Shamima. But when Shamima was speaking, when was Shamima? Somebody is monitoring, and I'm also monitoring.
I apologize.
Go ahead, please go ahead.
Yeah, but I still want to forcefully make the point that I'm making, because for me that is the understanding that I had from Shamima's presentation, because she turned it to be more of attitudinal or behavioral. And like I was making the argument, I think it was Thomas Madison who put it succinctly, that if men or humans were angels, then there wouldn't be any need for government. So it presupposes that if you leave the human being to do whatever he wants, certainly he will do things that will be inimical to the state. I have always maintained that every country in the world, right, all over the world, they have people that letters. If you go to America, you have people that letters. If you go to UK, you have people that letters. Indeed, beyond lettering, you have people that will break the planning laws.
Yeah.
It's all over the world. But the question is, why is it that when it comes to these countries, those countries do not always flood, or they do not flood? The answer is simple. The answer is that in those particular countries, there is enforcement and compliance in those particular countries. And so therefore, it supports the argument that I'm making, that when it comes to the conversation about flood, it has more to do with strong institutions and strong systems. And so for me, blaming citizens has always been a convenient way. And of course, I mean, not necessarily President Mahama or Shamima. It has always been the general narrative for people. Oh, that citizens are throwing rubbish indiscriminately, citizens are building in waterways. Yes, this is true. But in the first place, if institutions were working, why would the citizens even do that in the first place? So what we are witnessing, especially with President Mahama's attitude, is that now the president who's supposed to act has now become the complainant in the flood situation. Now the citizens who needs help has now become the accused. Because we are now seeing that the citizens are the ones, their behavior is causing that. And the state institutions and systems that are supposed to take responsibility are now becoming witnesses in this whole flood conversation. And so what happens? State institutions then absolve themselves, leadership find a convenient way to absolve themselves, and then the flood occurs. So for me, I think it's about time, and I'm happy that Shamima admits that she is going to elaborate and expand on what their government is doing. I wouldn't sit here, I mean, it would be inappropriate, to be so unfair to blame the NDC for causing this flood. No. Flood is not an NDC creator. Flood is not an MPP creator. Flood is a systemic and institutional failure that as politicians and leadership we failed to address. And that for me reinforces the point that I'm making, that yes, we should not reframe the conversation, because what happens is that then we'll be evasive about the realities, we'll be dismissive about the realities.
Right.
We need to take responsibility, yes, that in as much as there is a bit of attitudinal, there is a bit of behavioral, the higher and ultimate responsibility rests on leadership. I mean, if you take a helicopter, move through, and then come and tell us the amount of rainfall, who cares about the amount of rainfall? If you come and tell us that it's attitudinal, Moro, I am sure you don't letter. Me, I don't letter. I do not recall the last time in my life that I lettered. I have not built on waterways. I make sure I dispose my refuse so well. But yet still, I am affected and constantly has become a victim of people's attitude and people's behavior, other people's behavior. Why should I be a victim of people's behavior? Because state institutions has failed, because institutions are not working, and because leadership are also finding a convenient way to run away from the problem. All it happens is that it has always been a knee-jerk solution, a knee-jerk reaction. The knee-jerk reaction has always been that, and I need clarity from Simon. This one you may interrupt. I think you mentioned that you put some mitigation money. You mentioned 350 million. I read 300 million, so maybe for purpose of clarity, which the exact amount that we are talking about, this for clarity, I had 300 million, but you mentioned 350 million. And more, there is one other important point I want to make before you move to the next chapter of this conversation. You see, there is one thing that we are all missing. We are talking about the causes and how we can address with it. I noticed, and I saw some footages, where people were grappling for food items and salvaging their goods.
From warehouse.
Yeah, from warehouse. And other people were salvaging their goods, mattresses and other things. Maybe because of I started as a science student, then health student, before I moved into the analogous and humanities. At least from a basic understanding of science and health. You see, the flood water is not just an ordinary water. So we must be very cognizant of that.
Yeah.
The flood water is carrying contaminants, is carrying toxic substances, is carrying microorganisms, is carrying virus and all what you can think of. So even at a time like this, I expected a comprehensive model, a comprehensive communication, even educating people on what we saw on social media. But I mean, that's something we've not heard, because what essentially happens is that you may think that you are picking food items, salvage food items from a warehouse that has been caused by the flood. But what it means, in fact, and in science and in health, is that you are carrying pathogens and how do you call it? Disease-causing organisms into your homes.
Yeah.
And the sad situation will be when some of these items even find themselves in the shelves and in the market, which has been sold to us. And that itself has a whole health